Orisa, the Whorse of Overwatch. Though depending on the person, that horse can be spelled with the W, but sure luck. Of all the changes going from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, 6v6 to 5v5, I would argue that out of the two tanks who changed a lot going into these games, Orisa was the one who has changed by far the most. She's nearly a completely different character than who she used to be. Orisa is Overwatch's protector turned tyrant, so let's talk about it. As always, I'm going to be talking about Orisa's history first, and then we'll get into the game design talk. So if you already know her history by heart, well, feel free to skip ahead to whenever the hell the timestamp is. On release, Orisa was a very different character. To start off, she had 200 ammo on her primary fire, she had a protective 900 health barrier that she could throw out, and she had a mini grav in the form of Halt. Fortify was very similar to what we have today, only it just gave her the CC immunity and 50% damage reduction. And finally, her ultimate supercharger was an AoE 50% damage boost to anyone in her team who was in range. In August 2017, her barrier shape was changed to suit better for when enemies were underneath it, along with a 20% size increase, which I just thought was way funnier than it actually was because it just gave me the image of some DPS hiding underneath Orisa shield on high ground and shooting into her team's toes. Most of her changes were on the smaller end of things, a lot of number adjustments which I'll mention in a moment, along with things like supercharger consuming the ult entirely if it was cancelled during the animation. Over time, her primary fire got loads of number changes, stuff like the damage being reduced by 9%, the projectile speed being increased by 20%, the spread being reduced by 20%, the move speed penalty being reduced by 30%, and another projectile speed increase from 90 to 120. The same can be said with Fortify as well, such as the damage reduction being lowered from 40% from 50, or one of the biggest changes that I completely forgot about was Fortify cancelling headshot damage. But one part of her kit wasn't touched until the latter half of Overwatch 1, Halt. The first, in January 2020, the snare was lowered from 1 second to 0.65. In August of that year, it got the pull radius lowered from 7 to 4 meters, but the speed was increased from 20 to 30. The final change Orisa received during Overwatch 1 was to Halt, having its cooldown lowered from 6 to 8 seconds. Two tanks in Overwatch 2 received ground up reworks going into it, Orisa being one of them, and good god the tank players have opinions on this. First off, her base health and armor got increased by 50 each, giving her 500 HP in total. Her primary fire just got fully altered. It now fires 10 projectiles per second, which start out large and shrink as they travel. The damage started at 10.5 and scaled down to 4 over a range of 35 meters. And finally, her ammo got replaced with a heat mechanic. As you fire, you build up heat, where at full heat, you'd be locked out of shooting for 3 seconds. Sticking to the old parts of her kit, Fortify was given a bunch of changes as well. From lowering your move speed by 20%, giving Orisa bonus overhealth, and having the duration increased by 0.5 seconds, and also lowering the heat generation for your primary fire by 50%. She received 3 new abilities, starting with her secondary fire, Javelin Toss. Pretty much a ranged Doomfist punch. If it hit someone, they got stunned for 0.2 seconds, and it sent them back along, dealing some decent damage, and if they hit a wall, that stun was increased by 0.3 seconds. And I should add, I apologise for my Orisa gameplay during this video, I can't hit this ability to save my life. Our second new ability is Javelin Spin, which is basically just what happens if Defense Matrix got really angry. Orisa spins her Javelin for 1.75 seconds, increasing her forward move speed by 60% and by 20% for 2 seconds afterwards. It destroys any projectiles that get sent into it. The best part, though, is that it deals damage and knocks any enemies she runs into backwards by a bit. I have seen Orisa's juggle Reinhardts who are about to shatter, and it has no right being as funny as it is. Finally, her new ultimate, Terra Surge, automatically activates Fortify when used and pulls all nearby enemies towards Orisa. She starts charging up, dealing a little bit of chip damage and slowing enemies by 30%. Upon reaching full charge, or just whenever you decide to, she slams down, dealing damage based on the charge time. Now on release, this thing did piss damage at full charge, but by the second beta, we got a couple changes to fix this among other things. Starting off, Terra Surge max damage got increased from 275 to 500. Javelin Toss got a cooldown and damage nerf, Javelin Spin got its speed boost decreased but also had the cooldown decreased, along with the knockback being increased. Fortify had its headshot immunity removed and lost the 20% move speed penalty, and finally her primary fire. Damage got increased from 10 to 12, projectile size no longer scales with distance, projectile initial size reduced from 0.3 to 0.1, the critical damage bonus was increased from 50% to 100%, the damage fall off and maximum range reduced from 20% to 50%, and the maximum fall off range reduced from 15 to 35 meters to 15 to 25 meters. Good god. And later on in the beta, again, Fortify was changed to cancel critical damage. Can we just make up our minds here, Blizzard? A lot of her next changes brought us back to our good old number adjustments. Terra Surge also received some interesting changes. First, it now pierced barriers on impact, but it could also be interrupted by Sombra Hack. And Fortify went through the ringer of balance, dude. Like, the bonus health got reduced, then the damage reduction got increased, then the bonus health reduction got reverted, then the cooldown got changed to start upon activation, along with the cooldown being increased then, and oh yeah, naturally the bonus health got reduced again, oh, and the damage reduction got lowered, and then finally, Fortify became immune to force critical hits, which only happened because of Mauga's existence. And literally, the day I was editing this video, she got another set of changes. First, Fortify duration got reduced to 3.5 seconds, and it got a revert back to the beta version that gave her a 20% move speed penalty. Now, I don't have time to record a new piece for the design discussion, so this is going to go here. Orisa has been the flavour of the month tank for the last while, and these changes are good to help take that strength down, but consider that now we're going to have a rise in Mauga and Hog usage, and I think I'd rather do it more Orisa if I'm being honest with you. This change also just is not the way to go. She's already an unpopular tank thanks to how slow she plays both physically and metaphorically, and that's quite literally only going to get worse with this. The reduced duration is a good change, but the move speed isn't the way to go if you want to improve the Orisa experience. However, I can't blame them for going down this way, considering as I was getting footage for this video, I would frequently just run in a straight line towards the supports, kill them, and they couldn't do a thing about it. And also Blizzard, please, stop changing characters as I'm making a video on them. It's already happened during the Somber process, man. And finally, here we go. Terra Surge got its charge time buff for the first 2.5 seconds by 25%. So while Orisa's history isn't quite as colourful as the last two characters that I've covered, her meta history... oh good god. However, we may as well talk about her release first. Now, I didn't play Overwatch when Orisa was first released, so I can't speak from personal experience, but from the little bit of digging I've did, she was received fairly warmly, it looks like. Which for a new character, in any game really, that's quite the rarity. She needed some tweaks at the time, like getting her head hitbox lowered, because before that thing was the size of Roadhog's arse, it was actually, that was too big, like. But generally, she was received fairly warmly. She was a solid tank who really excelled at holding down one area with her team thanks to the nature of her barrier, but also she was doing really well in terms of combos the longer she was out. People were discovering more and more things, which one of the most common ones being things like pull hook, where you just pull above the enemy shield, grab whoever you can with a Roadhog hook, and that's a free pick 9 times out of 10. Though she wasn't too popular at this time, thanks to stuff like Dive, Moth Meta, and Goat being the primary things you would see, it wasn't until about 2019 when Orisa truly began to shine. But all of this was mostly in higher elos and pro play. What I want to talk about for a moment is the Orisa I knew when I started playing Overwatch, down in fecking silver. So while in higher elos, Orisa wasn't used too often, at least for the first few years of her release, for the general populace, she was the poster child of cheese. Stuff like bunker and pirate ship compositions were like everywhere in the elos that I used to play in. It was such a mess, but looking back on it, it's so hilarious. She was damn near omnipresent once you got to the third round and people just decided, guys, I just want to win this game, and they'd lock in some stupid cheese strat. Fortify, her barrier, and halt all made her really, really good at just holding down one area in particular. Now, thanks to the nature of her pretty static gameplay, she was very unpopular, but you would still frequently see her on the maps where her, and by extension the compositions she excelled in, were really, really strong. Stuff like 2CP defense, or even the occasional payload. But more than anything else, when you were in the Teletubby elo that I was in, you'd be seeing pirate ships whenever people just wanted to win the game, and half the time no one could deal with it, which is why you never saw it if you climbed up like barely to diamond and then people realized this is a terrible strat. But anyway, I'm getting off track. And for the uninitiated, bunker is what it sounds like. It was just any characters who wanted to hole up. You'd frequently see stuff like Orisa, D.Va, Hog as your tanks. You'd be seeing things like a Bastion, Torb, Hanzo or Widow for your DPS, and then stuff like Ana, Mercy, Zen for support. But once Baptiste came out, he pretty much became a staple alongside any Orisa comp. And as for Pirate Ship, it was just a very stupid strategy where you dump everything onto the payload. You put an Orisa there, a Torb, a Bastion, it would only work in silver, probably gold, and it was so dumb, but it was some of the most hilarious things you would see in like a quick play match on Junkertown would be an Orisa and a Reinhardt teaming up on the point to just create an orb of protection around a Bastion and a Torb turret who can't even see anything to begin with thanks to their hitboxes in the way. Moving on anyway, as I mentioned earlier, Orisa was at her strongest in and around the latter half of 2019. Even before the release of Roll Queue, people were realizing the strength of Orisa pull, and we were frequently seeing a lot more pull hook comps, but there was also a lot of generic pull combos being thrown around. It was essentially being used as a mini graviton surge for things like Barrage, Pulse Bomb, or even Spirit Dragon. Even outside of ultimates, a good pull nade combo could win you an entire fight by itself. This was also around the time she was finally able to plate shield while reloading, which made her feel so much better to play given how long the animation was. Orisa was also starting to become a frequent occurrence on double sniper comps, especially on maps like Joggertown, since she'd just sit beside her Hanzo and give him a shield to protect him from other sniper mirrors, or even as added protection from dive thanks to Halt. But of course, two things changed around this time, which brought Orisa from being a solid and strong pick to the most omnipresent tank in the game. The release of Sigma and Roll Queue. Yep, it's time to talk about Double Shield. Maybe I should have put in a content warning for any Overwatch 1 players. For anyone who only started playing in Overwatch 2, Double Shield is what it sounds like. Shield times 2. Now lads, I'm not here to discuss Double Shield meta. This video is about Orisa, so I'm going to keep things short. Pre-Sigma, Orisa was already strong at picking a teammate to set up around, be it Bastion, Hanzo, or even Hog, but since her shield was stationary and deployable, it meant there was always another side open to flanks. But Sigma's arrival changed this dynamic entirely, since he could redeploy his shield anywhere in less than a second. And look, listen, lads, okay. Double Shield was just an experience and a half, and it has been nearly 4 years since it was last in its peak, and I don't know if I do or don't like it anymore. I think it was fun for a bit, but it overstayed its welcome. So please, if you're going to be starting a 5v5 and 6v6 debate or anything of that sort in my comments, do it over something else. I do not want to read about Double Shield unless you're going to trauma dump about it, I guess. Either way, Double Shield was a constant for the remainder of Overwatch 1, though it never quite mirrored its prime back in around 2019 and 2020. And as for Orisa, she kind of just fell off the face of the earth, outside of being around on more Double Shield if the map allowed for it. There may have been the occasional pull hook combo, but it was much less common, especially when the radius on Halt finally got its nerf. But before we get into Overwatch 2, I want to talk about Orisa for a moment. And I don't mean her game design from Overwatch 2 or anything like that, though that is my forte. What I'm saying I want to talk about is Orisa's art direction. Hello, Editing Rory here. My microphone bugged out as I was recording this, so I need to re-record it here. Orisa is a protector, a peaceful one at that. Her Overwatch 1 design acted on this brilliantly. None of her abilities other than her primary fire would actually harm enemies. She had her shield for protecting allies, Fortify and Halt were both great to stop enemies from going in on you and by extension your allies, and Bongo, well look, she didn't directly harm people, we'll say. Even in her story it says this, but I need to properly pull up my laptop to quote this, so give me a moment. I also apologise if I butcher this name. Nade was assigned to teach Orisa combat tactics, but she was conflicted, as Nade insisted on the need to use dirty tactics while Orisa didn't want to cause direct harm. Taking a quick look at Overwatch 2, and everything except for Fortify in Orisa's kit harms you. I am a firm believer in game design comes first. Whether we're talking the gameplay of your character, how they play versus other people, or anything of that sort, we're playing a video game to begin with. The most important thing is how the character in the game reacts to other characters in the game. The story, motivations, beliefs, lore, art design, all of those things about a character, while certainly not secondary, and I'm not saying that they are whatsoever, what I am saying is that they should match up with the gameplay of that character based on what the gameplay fantasy was to begin with. You could certainly come up with the lore and the story of a character first, and then have the gameplay revolve around that. That works perfectly fine, but that's a lot harder to do and a lot harder to balance around just thanks to the nature of games these days. And this especially is hard to deal with if you need to rework a character, because just look at this video and who we're talking about, because good God, she's the complete opposite now. Like I just said, you can certainly start off with a story idea for your character, but you need to stand your damn ground if you're going to act on it. Because the second you need to change their gameplay for anything of any sort, whether it's balance or just because they're not fun to play, well, if it's going to end up completely contradicting their story, you're really just insulting the players who absolutely loved that character for their original story, their original design, and the original gameplay that acted on that design. Despite that, Overwatch 2 Orisa was pretty much the original lose the first fight, swap to counter the enemy tank character. But despite this, she's always had one of the lowest win rates out of all the tanks, one of the lowest play rates of all the tanks, and even despite this, I don't think people mind because people really hate this character. Orisa 2.0 has what I like to call the too much problem. The majority of players, she does too much damage and she's too hard to kill. Now, personally, I don't find her damage overbearing, but I certainly find her survivability intolerable. But despite this, you never see Orisa picked first. Like, I've been playing a lot of ranked recently, and I swear to you, I've not seen a single Orisa picked first in all of my games. I've seen Orisa's being swapped to as a counter. There's not one moment where I see a first pick Orisa. It doesn't exist. Like, I'm playing in and around, like, Diamond 1 to Masters 4, so I do apologize to anyone in that elo for having to deal with me on Venture, but so no one's locking in Orisa there. There's not a single soul who wants to play her first. They only play her as a counter in order to win. No one likes dealing with Orisa. Most tank players aren't fans of playing her, and pretty much the entirety of the player base doesn't like to play against her because I have unloaded like 47 clips into this creature and she's not even dipped below half health. I won't deny, a good chunk of the problem with Orisa comes from Overwatch's absurd overhealing issue, which the DPS passive they added a while ago certainly helped with, but she's still an absolute pain in the hole to remove from the field. While I did say earlier on that her damage isn't overbearing, her longevity makes everything about her overbearing. It doesn't matter if she has low numbers if she's able to stay alive for this long. The numbers quite literally add up. More damage can be dealt, more stuns can be thrown, more knockbacks can be applied, and of course, more healing can be received, which starts the process all over again, and it repeats and repeats and repeats. Now usually, one of the best counters to this kind of style would be, just stun them. But we have a mild issue with that solution now, don't we? This longevity is what makes Orisa a tyrant. The girl won't leave the office even after her own team has voted her out. Personally, I think Orisa is a necessary evil for Overwatch 2. Although, this necessary evil, as I put it, well, she was forced into being a necessary evil by Blizzard. I mean, that change to ignore force crits and fortify, that was purely to deal with Mauga. That was just entirely to counter Mauga. That was just an artificial way of creating a Mauga counter, other than another Mauga. If you need to change an aspect of a character to specifically deal with only one other out of your entire roster, I don't think that change is warranted. I think that first character is just a problem. But this video is about Orisa, not Mauga, so we can ignore that for the moment. Earlier on, I was talking about her lore and how she was a peaceful protector and all that, but I will say, at the very least, there's one aspect of her lore that they did keep entirely intact for her gameplay. She is an absolute nightmare for Doomfist to deal with. Which does check out, considering that is quite literally the purpose that she exists for. Overwatch 2's Orisa highlights a problem that tanks in a 5v5 environment have, to me. They gotta do everything. Good tankiness, good damage, good CC, good utility, a good home insurance deal, have a solid monthly income, be able to take care of their 4 kids who they have to deal with, though suspiciously 2 of these kids are much more mature than they are sometimes. Old Orisa obviously would not work in the 5v5 landscape. She would get absolutely trampled, and she's the one who's meant to be doing the trampling. She's the horse. And I will say, even though she was never my favorite tank to play, I do really miss Halt as an ability. Whether I was playing as Orisa or even playing against her, I never found it to be a frustrating ability to deal with, and when you were playing as or with an Orisa, having Halt combos was really fun, especially when people were actually using voice chat, and now I've realized why we probably don't have Halt anymore. In the end, she went from a tank who excelled at protecting her team from the enemy to a Tyrant who can't protect her team at all unless the way you protect your team is by killing the enemy before they kill you. But I want to hear it from you. What do you think about Orisa? Overwatch 1, Overwatch 2, no matter the meta you were in, no matter the rank you are, I want to hear your own opinion on it. And since we're at the end of this video, I have a few things that I need to say just for myself. So again, and this probably won't be the last time you hear me say this, I do want to thank you for the support on the last few videos. It's very, it means a lot, and I'm going to try and put in as much work as I can so that I can do these more and more and more. So if there's any character in this series that you wish to see, please drop them in the comments, let me know. If you have any points you want to see made about them or anything of that sort, by all means, let me know. I want to make good content that you people would like. Like I said in the last video, I want to try and make just some more positive videos because the last few have just seemed very negative, and I'm trying to work on that, so we'll find out either way. If I can come up with maybe some solid designed characters, maybe make a video on some of the good ones that Overwatch has made, I can go ahead and do that. But for now, if you're new here, I've made 2 other videos in this series, so if you like them, please go check them out. They're on Sombra and Symmetra respectively. If you've already seen those 2 videos and you're a returning person, well, to begin with, thank you for coming back, but also, I have a load of other videos involving Overwatch and other games and game design in those games, so if you want to check those out, I'd really appreciate it, and I can link to a few of them in wherever. I'm not too sure, I'll find out. And as per usual, if you stayed all the way through, sure look, drop a like, drop a sub, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll talk to you next time, lads. And finally, here we are. Terra Surge got the charge rate for the first 2.5 seconds buffed by 25%. So, fuck's sake. Oh, Jesus. And finally, here we go. Terra Surge got the charge rate changed for the first 2.5 seconds by 25%. So what the f... And finally, here we go. Terra Surge got its charge time buffed by 25% during the first 2.5 seconds. Why are you going into